Okay, just when we're ready to go, let us know.
Indeed.
No problem. Da 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 da. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to tonight's episode of Paranormal Encyclopedia. As always, I'm your host, Kevin Mears, demonologist, Paranormal Encyclopedia, and Paranormal Investigator.
As sometimes, I'm Brian McKinley, vampire author and godfather of vampire thrillers.
And never, I am Baron Voltage, resident recreational hypnotist and medium. I guess is the best way to describe it. Yeah, no?
Oh boy.
Yep.
We're adding.
But are you a medium or a medium rare?
Yes.
He's a rare medium.
There you go.
Those of you who follow us on Facebook may be expecting Virgo Triad to be joining us tonight. So there's some unfortunate news there, but it's not a serious thing, which was originally, yes, we were supposed to have Virgo on. It was going to be mirrored to her channel, be a whole big thing. Unfortunately, she's not feeling well this evening, so she's been pushed back to next week, and tonight we're going to do popular misconceptions about the paranormal.
Which was our original topic, but we wish Virgo well.
Yes, because she is awesome, and definitely a friend of the show.
Yes, and a friend to Virgos everywhere.
And Jack Lennox says, you guys, Virgo rocks. And yes, Virgo does.
Virgo does rock.
And she will be on next week. We do apologize if anybody was looking forward to that. So, before we get into the meat of the topic, we need to promote one of our two sponsors. And as always, we'll do the other one at the end. So, folks, check out, if you haven't already, audibletrial.com/paranormale. You get a free 1-month subscription. It is, for those of you who by now don't know what Audible is, it is a resource connected to Amazon for audiobooks. It has thousands of them. All of Brian's books are on there. Dacre Stoker, who we had on a while back, is on there. There are lots of books on the paranormal, both fiction and nonfiction. There's an enormous number of great choices. It's very inexpensive. It's like $15 a month. And if you go through the website, the link that we're giving you, you get a free month and a free audiobook to go with it. I would also recommend, I'm still working on it, it's called the most complete vampire collection ever. It is 50 hours worth of audio read vampire novels and short stories. There's Anne Rice on there. There's Camilla. There's endless piles of great stuff.
Nice.
And
all read by the same person or different people?
I think different people, actually.
It could be.
Okay.
So, also, folks, if you remember, we had a Kickstarter that didn't do so well. I gotta tell you, we're gonna start it again, but we have hopefully a little bit better reason for you guys to consider giving us some help. We just spoke with our station owner tonight, who's a great guy, and the reality is, we now have an opportunity to go back to doing a 2-hour show instead of just an hour show. There's some stuff in particular we've got lined up, coming up, that would be really good, much better over the 2 hours instead of a single hour, and in terms of guests and call-ins and things of that nature. The reality, though, is none of us make very much money, and way that, for those of you who don't know, the way that radio works is you pay for your airtime, and then sponsors and things like that reimburse. So we're going to be trying to raise some money. If you know any businesses that might like to sponsor a show, have them get in touch with us.
Or advertise.
Indeed.
We'll be doing the Kickstarter in a couple of days. For the meantime, please go patreon.com/demonology. Patreon.com/demonology. Help out if you can. And that'd be an enormous help to us. On the upside, we also want to mention, coming up, we've got a couple of special dates coming.
Yes.
In September, do anyone remember the exact date? I want to say the 18th.
I think it was the 18th.
I believe it's September 18th. If you go to the Facebook Paranormal Encyclopedia, the exact date's on there. But we will be coming up on 3 years since I first started doing this series on YouTube. A couple of dates right around the same time. We'll also make exactly 1 year since I started here at Hamilton Radio.
I think the 18th is the 1 year here.
Yeah, then a few days off of that is 3 years altogether.
3 years
together. Yeah. And then here's the big one. On October 11th of 2018, we will be having our 50th anniversary. Now,
50th show, not 50th.
Oh, 50th show. 50th show.
Every week is an anniversary to us.
Yeah.
Folks,
time flies.
Here's the deal with the 50th. One, we're going to roll all three into one big celebration. We do plan on doing smaller videos to mark each of the other anniversaries, but the 50th episode is going to be a big deal. We're going to have a whole bunch of special guests. I mean, we're talking about, I've got about 10 people lined up already who've all agreed to call in.
It's the
to
best
take
of
part in
Paranormal
it.
Encyclopedia.
All the awesome.
Yeah, our favorite guests are all coming back now. And in fairness, we have a lot of great guests.
Yeah, we do.
Well, I was one of them, and look
Yeah.
what they did.
And he's stuck in a seat.
Look what happened to him. Poor guy.
There's going to be other surprises. There's going to be an enormous amount of cool things. We're hyper excited about this. This is a big part of it. Like I said, we got cool things coming up that we could use the second hour for.
Oh, yeah.
10 guests in an hour is going to be challenging.
Challenge accepted.
Oh, we could do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, just run them
I
through
think-
one after another.
I think we've been financial long enough. I hate talking about money. I hate asking people for money. It sucks.
Yeah.
So why don't we kick
Not our
in
favorite thing.
into tonight's episode? So we've decided, because I always start everything on this show, I'm not going to do that tonight. Brian's going to start us off with common misconceptions about vampires.
Yes. All right. So, a lot of fun ones. There are a lot, and Baron here is going to throw more at me
Oh, yes.
over time.
Indeed.
Throwing a couple that he's heard. All right. So, let me see. What the biggest one probably for most people is vampires can't stand the sunlight. They burst into flames. Truth is, that's pretty much only been happening since the 1950s when Christopher Lee, Dracula burst into flames on film. The whole tradition with sunlight started with Nosferatu.
There we go.
But there was the first time it actual flames. It was before
Christopher.
that. It was they would fade gracefully, like in the old Universal movies. They would fade gracefully and turn into skeletons in evening wear.
Real vampires don't die, they just fade away.
That I
Exactly.
can think of none of the time. Dracula doesn't ever die in sunlight in his movies.
I think it
At
was
least, I mean, the original Universals.
not in the original.
Not in the Universal Monsters.
Usually they would nail
Stake
him.
up to the heart.
Oh, yes. He's been nailed to the wall of his coffin.
But in one of the I think it was the first horror of Dracula, Christopher Lee or Peter Cushing pulls down the curtains
The big heavy
and
curtain, and he
reveals
bursts
the
into
sunlight.
flame.
He bursts into flame because it was very dramatic and very cinematic at the time. It had never been done.
and the cross of the two candlesticks.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
You were going to
So-
say, right, Baron?
I was going to say Christopher Lee can make anything look dramatic. He could be taking a dump and it'll be dramatic. It's awesome.
The dude was just epic.
Yes, he was. Still is.
Not an image I needed, but thanks.
You're welcome. It's Christopher Lee. No said. Now just imagine him in the fangs and the cape taking a dump.
let's,
You'll win.
let's get this correct. It's Sir Christopher Lee,
Oh, yes. Cannot forget the sir.
Lord
descendant
of
of Charlemagne, heavy metal singer, fencer.
Lord of the Sith.
Yeah,
Member
Lord-
of the,
yeah.
Secret Service. Oh, not Secret Service. I'm sorry. The Spy Service for Her Majesty?
No, let's just be clear.
Real life
The
change.
Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. Because that name is so much cooler than Her Majesty's Secret Service.
It's so much more British.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
I swear, he is the guy that Alan Rickman studied to do the Snape stare.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure you're right.
Yes.
So other misconceptions, because otherwise we're going to geek on
Yeah,
nonstop.
we'll keep going. But, other popular misconceptions. That a big one that I always come across, and especially you see it in like documentaries and things where they ought to know better, is that all vampire folklore originates from Eastern Europe, which is not at all the case. There was vampire folklore in every region of the world. Eastern Europe, yes, is where we get a lot of what became our popular folklore, thanks largely in part to Bram Stoker and the vampire craze of the 17 and 1800s.
Although even
But-
Stoker drew from Irish mythology.
Yes, he did. That's where he got a lot of his stuff that works on Dracula actually came from the myths of the fairies and ghosts in Ireland. But that's another fun. I've got a whole thing about that. So, but yeah, crosses, all that sort of thing, being traditional weaknesses, not that traditional in most parts of the world. Vampires had all kinds of funny weaknesses. There are vampires that turned into, little chickens and snakes and whatnot and everything else. Very rarely turned into wolves. In a lot of cases, vampires could actually be killed by wolves because they were considered to be like natural enemies.
Mm-hmm.
And they never turned into bats.
And yeah, they never turned into bats until, well, there's an African type of witch vampire that turns into a bat.
Okay.
Wasn't there?
But that makes sense because bats are native to like that area.
Bats are natives to everywhere.
I've actually got a little bit more to tack on with that. There was some sort of a statement about Vlad himself,
Yes.
the Count.
Another
Dracula,
big misconception we can get into.
That his armies, when they were fighting the Turks, would hang from the trees like bats, and possibly that could have been the attribution to
That
it.
sounds extremely unlikely.
That was probably something, again, like a lot of stuff about Vlad and his battlefield tactics. A lot of that was attributed later, like the stuff about drinking blood and the blood of his enemies.
Though there may have been some truth to
There might
that.
be some truth to that, but that had more to do with basically
Warrior tradition.
Intimidation tactics.
It's
more
not
than
just
anything else.
I don't think it's just intimidation tactics. There's also the reality of warrior culture in Europe did have this idea of drinking the blood of your enemies, not as a vampire, but this idea that the blood of your enemies held their strength. So you drank that to take your strength into yourself as a symbolic
Drink from
thing.
chalices of skulls.
Although, drink from the skulls of your enemies, things like that. Yes. But yeah, there was never any until Dracula. There was never any sort of idea that Vlad the Impaler was a vampire. It was sort of retrofitted onto him.
Although he was associated with another type of undead creature, something with an M. I forget the exact name for it.
The Mara or the Moroi?
Might be.
Because those were essentially a nightmare creature. The idea that he may have rose from his own death, because he did survive at least one assassination attempt.
Because he was that hardcore.
Snagoff Monastery, where he was probably buried, there are reports of people seeing his headless corpse running about.
Yes, that might be where that comes from. The idea of, but there's that tradition. There's a lot of like famous lords and people.
Yeah.
And stuff
That's very common.
Dead.
And there you're dealing with more ghosts than vampires.
Indeed.
Yeah. But a lot of times, like I say in my presentation, there's less of a firm line between ghosts.
True,
and
but
vampires.
how does a vampire drink blood without his head?
Carefully.
Yeah.
Especially traditionally in a lot of cultures, cutting the head off is a way of getting rid of a vampire.
That's what I was thinking.
That is one of the more traditional methods.
What, Beth?
That's how you get rid of most things.
Yeah. Or fire. It's like, you
Fire's
burn
a
it. That's a pretty good solution to a lot of things.
Kill it with fire.
Witches, werewolves, vampires.
Yep, pretty universal.
When
Bad
in
people
doubt,
from New
set it on
England.
aflame.
Yes.
So,
I actually have a question for you
okay.
as a resident vampire expert.
Shoot.
I remember in high school hearing about what I always thought was one of the more interesting ideas in terms of vampire lore. So traditionally, even aside from the holy symbol thing, there is an idea that things that we associate with good kind of drive vampires back. I've heard a rumor there's a type of African vampire that it is so, because it is so evil and malevolent, evil things actually push it back. Have you ever heard of this?
I have not. I've not heard of this. I've heard of there's a type of African witch that will enslave a vampire creature that becomes its like servant and does its bidding.
Yeah.
And kind of owns it. There are ones that are driven by all kinds of weird things. There's one that eats drinks the blood out of the toe.
Yep.
Out of the big toe.
Out of the toe.
Yeah.
Aleps don't do that, don't they?
Actually, no. I turned out I was wrong about that. The big toe thing was the African vampire,
Okay.
not the German Alp, which became the elf. But I was right about the breast milk thing. They had a thing for breast milk.
That does sound a little, yeah. And nothing that does sound a little bit German to
Yeah.
actually go
Yeah.
for the toes. I mean, come on.
It sounds like it could be. I
Yeah.
mean, I think a lot of things get blurred together anyway over
Yeah.
time. But no, I've run into so many weird folklore things. And the problem is nowadays it's so hard to know how many of them were ever actually taken seriously and how many of them were told to anthropologists and things as sort of a joke.
Well, there's a bunch.
Garlic?
Like the vampire melon thing.
Yeah.
No,
Vampire
garlic
pumpkins
is used
too.
a lot. The vampire pumpkins, vampire lawn ornaments.
Well, you got to keep in mind there are mountains in the
Tools.
United States and Africa and a few other places that have names that are traditionally Native American or Native African. That if you actually translate them as, it's a mountain, you idiot. Because somebody went to a native person and said, "What do you call that?" And they went, "A mountain."
Yeah, exactly.
And because Americans, Europeans were stupid about this kind of thing,
well, so
they wrote that down as the name.
Most Native American tribes, you look at what they're called. If it's not some name that was slapped onto them by white people, but what they actually call themselves, generally it means the people.
Yeah.
or us.
There's
usually not too complicated.
There's a great joke on this from Discworld where there's something on the map that the name translates as "your finger, you fool," because the explorer pointed to this spot on the map and goes, "What do you call that?" And the native goes, "You fit your finger, you fool."
Oh, wow.
Nice. So what any other traditions you want to know about?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Two.
Okay.
Actually, two.
One, two.
Yes, I knew that was coming. Running water.
Running water. Actually, I've encountered that more in Asian folklore than in European. Although it did eventually make its way over to some parts of Eastern Europe, but generally the idea was it wasn't that the vampire couldn't cross running water. It was that the safest way to deal with them after they were dead, you would cut their head off and you would bury the body under running water, in like a river or something, with its mouth stuffed full of garlic or wine or something. Like it was.
It was a meal.
There are all kinds of different traditions.
Yeah.
The funniest thing, the reason that Eastern Europe comes up so often is probably per capita it's got more vampire myths than any other region on Earth.
No doubt.
Every little country in there has their own little variations on what they call a vampire, what the vampire does, what its weaknesses are. So you can find like 100 different vampires just in there. Most of them are going to be the same thing with little variations for like local flavor and stuff. But
there are that many of them.
There's a lot. Yeah, it really is kind of a hotbed.
And some of it, I mean, I remember reading a story as a kid in a book of vampire folklore that there's a country that puts vampires on formal trial.
Yes. Yeah.
That is awesome.
That one I don't. There was a country in Africa that just recently killed somebody for being a vampire.
Yeah.
But yeah, you could be tried in a lot of cases because in some of the legends and stuff, the vampire would basically come home as this smelly kind of corpse, a couple days old.
Yep.
And basically just try to resume living its life. It would just, start sleeping with its wife again, sit down and demand dinner, and
So it's a tax accountant.
and basically
basically
would just come back and just be a vampire, and people would be like, it's a vampire, we got to get rid of it. It's like, yeah, I know, but God, it's such a pain.
And for that matter,
Tax season.
There's
We
also
gotta
the
get all
reality
these
of
W-2s processed. We
they
can't kill
also
them.
put witches on trial. They put werewolves on
Exactly.
trial. The Malleus Maleficarum says there's a certain type of redhead that are all vampires.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
No. I'm going to correct that. It's
Grease.
that there's a certain type of vampire. No, there's certain redheads that are all types of vampires. There you go. Okay.
Nice. Yes, there are certain cultures that the redheads get blamed for just about everything from witchcraft to demonic possession to being vampires to being, born
Of
werewolves.
course, the reality is that redheads are largely starting to disappear, genetically speaking.
No.
Well,
I know.
No.
Except
I
in
know.
My girlfriends
America.
are redheads. No. No.
It's
The
all right.
gingers must survive.
It's all right. It probably won't
They're
happen
not-
in your lifetime.
They were saying that like there wouldn't be new redheads born probably in the next X number of years, but I just saw a thing saying that isn't true.
No.
Thank goodness.
I mean, the reason is it's always been a genetic anomaly,
Yeah.
and it comes from 2 recessive genes, which makes it unlikely. So usually you have to have both genes activated from both parents in order for it. So it was always a strange thing, and people gave it all kinds of,
Come for the paranormal,
connotations.
stay for the genetics lesson.
Dun, dun, dun. Yes.
Well, I actually have
elementary genetics.
I have something actually in line with where both of them do connect.
Oh,
Just a
there you
little
go.
bit. Okay, and then we'll kick on to the second or third misconception because one other actually just popped up. Is it plausible that at some point in history we came across somebody with a hemoglobin deficiency with also allergy to sunlight and suffered from pica?
Pica?
Or pica.
Yeah, the disease where you basically eat or drink anything. You look at a paperclip and you're like, yummy.
There's a theory about that, actually.
Well, it's actually
And
It's a
has
debunk-
narcolepsy.
porphyria generally
Thank
gets
you,
more
porphyria.
credit for vampire.
And it's a load of
belief.
force manure.
It is. There's a lot of
It's really
of
another
diseases.
misconception.
Yeah, it is. That
Yeah.
it's another one that
See, there you go.
that porphyria and certain diseases cause the idea of vampirism. No, the idea of vampirism has been around for thousands of years. It's just
easily.
certain diseases mimic a few traits, and so yes, it would make
It's
some people
reasonable-
suspicious.
Reasonable to think that. I think there are certain diseases that probably explain certain what were thought to be vampire outbreaks.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly, like the Mercy Brown incident that happened in
Quite.
Rhode Island easily fits of an outbreak of tuberculosis.
Yes.
And even historically, it may very well, there may have been I mean, from a purely entomological perspective, there may have been, even in ancient times, you have somebody wasting away from this disease, you don't understand what it is. Well, it's an evil spirit feeding on them.
Oh,
and
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Plagues and all of that were all caused
Yeah.
usually by witches or evil spirits or some
Demon-
kind of malevolent ghost.
There you
It's
go.
a very easy
And when you add to that-
scapegoat.
It's not unusual, especially if somebody's recently died, to have dreams about them, to think you've
course
seen
not.
them everywhere.
Yeah.
And you combine one with the other and you get vampires.
Exactly.
Indeed.
So those are all very there's a lot of explanations. There's a lot of things that go together. There's no one explanation for everything.
Yeah, there you go. Okay.
And as fascinating as this is, just in terms of time constraints, I think it's time
Fair
to give
enough.
Baron his chance.
Yeah, we'll go over to hypnosis.
Whoa. I still got two more, young man.
Okay, fair enough.
Go-
We're not
go
at the half-hour mark yet.
Go for it.
All right. The OCD. That they have to either unknot a knotted rope or count rice or anything basically thrown to them one way or the other, even salt.
That does appear in genuine folklore. Not in all folklore. Mostly it's Chinese, but also you find it in Greece and the Middle East.
Few Eastern Europeans.
Some places in Eastern Europe they would bury the vampire with like a bunch of knotted rope that
So
they
they'd
would
have to untie it all.
untie. Or it was just to literally tie them up so
Yeah.
that they couldn't get out. There was a lot of very practical solutions like that.
Nail his head to the coffin so he can't get out.
Exactly.
go.
Turn the body so that it was facing downward, so that if it started clawing, it would claw downward into the earth.
Oh, that's a smart-ass remark.
Cut.
Carried behind, like,
cut the head off so that, and put it between the vampire's legs,
so
Not-
I can't find it.
so that no, it could not that they couldn't find it, it couldn't reach it.
Ah,
In the coffin, it couldn't get the head up, so that it couldn't like put it back on its head.
carry the coffin past 50 crossroads so it can't find its way back.
That's
All
wow.
the superstitions, yeah.
Now, if somebody is actually looking into trying to get into the folklore behind it, and they're trying to do their own research to, like, maybe check out a misconception one way or the other,
Yes.
what would you actually consider to be
Good question.
a good enough credible sources to say to yourself, okay, that's verified, as opposed to maybe just finding one source?
I would say I'd start looking on different sites, like find places that have what appears to be good information, and then look and see what kind of bibliography they're sporting. You know, if it's they've got all their information from a couple of books, okay, maybe not so knowledgeable. If on the other hand they've got a big slew of reference material,
Like about 10 or 15 different
yeah,
sources.
that's something you can really start, and then you start looking up those reference books, and you'll learn.
I would say a good book source to start with. There's a very colorful 20th century bishop by the name of Montague Summers.
Oh yes, I know him.
Montague is a character because this is somebody who believed the witch trials were justified because those types of witches really existed, believed in vampires, believed in werewolves. So his writing is quite strange, but he did a lot of scholarly work on the actual folklore. And the only major problem you run into is the man, because he was in fact a very legitimate scholar as well as a bishop, liked to write things in the original languages, which is good. I highly approve of that. But he didn't like to translate them.
Yeah, so you get different translated. But yeah, Montague Summers wrote The Vampire, His Kith and Kin.
In Lore and Legend as well.
In Lore and Legend. There was also a book he did on werewolves, which is quite interesting. Shapeshifters
and a translation of the Malleus Maleficarum, and a couple of books on witches.
There's a couple of classic books like that, but in a lot of cases now, if you look at modern scholarly work, they're going to reference most of the important elements of those older books, and they're going to put them in a historical context so that you can.
Do you have any particularly good websites, Brian?
There's a Vamped.com is run by the guy that I told you, Anthony Hogg, who is a vampirologist. He's actually a scholar of vampire lore and legends. He doesn't believe in them himself, but he studies them very thoroughly, and he's one of the most knowledgeable people I know of. So I always sort of go back to him.
Links in the description, which is what I was going to say. Is don't worry about remembering them all. Just if you can message me like a couple of good links.
I will find a couple of good
links. And Baron, when we get to you, if you message me some good links, I'll put them in the description.
I'll do what I can to figure out what I got.
Yes, but vampires hypnotizing people, also something that mostly comes from the movies and books, not the original folklore.
And there you go. That's a good transition.
Yes, that is an excellent transition.
We on the mark for a second sponsor, or we want to
we'll do the second sponsor at the end.
Awesome.
Although we should give out the number.
Yes.
So, folks, if you're enjoying this and you would like to call in and contribute, remember the number is 609-807-2492, 609-807-2492. But for the time being, take it away, Baron.
All right. Common misconceptions about hypnosis.
Which is really an episode by itself.
Oh, yes. You want to know what the thing is to say? I'm more than happy to relinquish my spot specifically so that you can have all the time in the world to talk on the paranormal.
All three of us could easily do an episode by ourselves.
Yes.
But I want to give you a chance to at least get into some of it.
Very well.
Highlights, as it were.
All right. Well.
You got a phone call.
Oh, hello.
Oh, wow.
Hey, phone call.
Good evening, caller. You're on the air with Paranormal Encyclopedia.
Hello, it's Erin again. How are you?
Good. How you doing?
I'm good. So when I was watching while I was doing work from home, I noticed that you guys were talking about vampires and the lore about vampires. I'm like, yes, I can so relate to this topic. Nostalgia.
So do you know any vampires?
Other than
there's one on the cast.
Yeah. Well, yeah, other than the obvious.
What I found really interesting was how redheads were mentioned, and that redheads are associated with being witches, vampires, demons.
Yep.
I happen to be a redhead. I'm not a vampire, even though people may think I am because I'm so pale. But no, one of the lores that I hear about vampires is that they have to be invited in. They can't cross into somebody else's home.
And again, surprisingly, this doesn't show up. This is something Stoker more or less created based on
He didn't
some
create
lore
it.
and legend.
He didn't take it from vampires so much. He took it from my neck of the woods.
He took it from
demons. Have to be invited in.
Yes. Which now,
but if you think about it, vampires technically are demons of the night because they're technically not living creatures. They're undead.
Right.
True. This falls
and
into
they
a
come
giant
from
gray
hell,
area.
if you think about it.
Yeah, the closest it shows up, that specific thing shows up in the folklore is in the Greece, in the with the Virkolakas. It goes around, and when it rises, it knocks on the doors of people in the village that it knew, and it calls out their name. And if you answer the door, it attacks you and drains your blood, and you rise from the dead as one as well. if you don't say anything, it passes along and it will never come back and harm you. It gave rise to a tradition in Greece of only answering the door on the second knock.
There's also,
of course.
there are legends like
What's
this
really
in the rest of Europe,
interesting
too.
is that because I watched True Blood and then I watched Dracula with Gary Oldman and Winona Ryder.
Oh, yeah.
And when Dracula was like seducing Lucy, it's very interesting how he just kind of was just like, yeah, hey, I'm here.
Yep.
And then with True Blood, he had one of the vampires had to be invited in, and I was like, okay.
Yeah, they play
So
fast
I
and
just
loose with that a
found
lot.
an interesting
Yeah.
parallel with that.
It is. And it is very much with the concept of evil, and evil's a choice. It's something you invite in. It's not something that gets thrust upon you.
I used to love on Angel how they would make fun of the trope where, like, just after a while, like, David Boreanaz would come walking in and they're like, hey, wait a minute, what are you? And he's like, it's a motel. It's public accommodation. I can walk in. Like, there's all these, like,
But
little
there's at least that
sub-paragraphs.
acknowledgement of it, which I like.
But they start having so much fun with it. Like,
Yeah, and then when you mentioned something about evil, it made me think of like an Amish saying that the Amish say, you don't need to call the devil will come without calling.
yeah.
Yeah, very much so.
All right. So
Okay.
we on Hypno now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're about to go. We're about to talk to about hypnotism.
All right.
So, Aaron, thank you so much for calling.
Yes.
Always a pleasure.
You're welcome.
Yes.
Now, with
Have a good evening.
thank
You
you
too.
very much. Hypnosis. I'm gonna immediately shoot down the one major misconception. Hypnosis is not mind control.
It's not?
It's not.
No, it's not. You nutcases.
So by
No.
studying it, I can't get an army of slaves? Dang.
Well, actually, no.
I was gonna say, if anybody was gonna have an army of slaves, don't you think this guy would?
Yeah,
have an
he'd be the
army of
one.
Yeah,
slaves?
you know, I mean, come on. I'd have an entourage and a half. Where's Elizabeth Hurley when I need her? But no, hypnosis is not mind control. And by the way, when you do go under hypnosis, you're still awake. Ideally, you're still awake. You don't fall asleep. You're actually fully and 100% aware of your surroundings. You're aware of who's speaking to you. You're aware of all the sounds and voices of the people
And
around
as someone
you.
who's been under hypnosis, I can confirm this.
Yes. Hypnosis is essentially a meditative state that is induced by the guided voice of the hypnotist. That is all. And we cannot make you do anything that you don't want to do. There's a mechanism within the mind that's called agency, which immediately subverts any and all external suggestions, where you can basically say, don't wanna. The subconscious and the conscious are two different parts of the mind, and whenever you're going through hypnosis, you are conversing with both of those without the secretary in the middle, which is Roz from Monsters, Inc. It's my personal favorite metaphor.
I like it too.
Exactly. You have to go through her before you can talk to them too, and if you want to be hypnotized, she'll take a lunch break. If you,
Wazowski.
What do you want, Wachowski? You're not on the schedule. Get the hell out.
no. But I think we just broke Beth.
Yeah, I think we did.
Nice.
And the thing is we honestly, as hypnotists, we follow a very strict code of two things. One, since I'm a recreational hypnotist and not a hypnotherapist, I cannot do anything medically relevant when it comes to hypnosis. I can't make you quit smoking. I could, but I won't. I can't make you thinner through hypnosis. I could, but I won't. And ultimately, I can't solve any internal phobias and make them go away. I could, but I won't.
You need a license.
There is licensing processes
Yes.
in order to be able to go through that.
And I actually, at some point down the road, I have a friend who is a medical hypnotherapist.
Yeah, I know
and I'll
about
probably try and bring
billion
her
of
in.
them. Yep. Yeah, and you know what? I'll tell you this. All hypnosis is that guided meditation.
Yeah.
It will take you to trigger things within your mind to see, hear, feel, taste, touch. My personal favorite is making a person think a glass of water is vodka and then watch them get drunk on it.
I'll
It's
tell you one of my
hilarious.
favorite stories, because my priest friend who's passed was trained in a bit of medical hypnosis.
Yes.
Him telling me about a story, because he was trained in it, being brought in for a woman who, because of various addiction issues, couldn't be given. She was about to have a baby. She couldn't be given anesthetic.
Right.
Using the hypnosis, and it was not a wanted baby. She was having it. She didn't believe in abortion, and she was giving it up for adoption. not the intended effect of the hypnosis, but not only did it actually manage to manage her pain, she didn't even remember having the kid.
Yeah, that does happen.
Wow.
And most of the time when a person does go down into what we call the trance state and we bring them back up, they will remember. Although some people immediately, because they have the preconceived notion as to what hypnosis is, will immediately force their mind to forget what was going on during that state.
Is it also true some people, I remember reading once, some people when they get up on stage will just put themselves into a trance?
Oh yes, enthusiasm is the one. All right, I'm gonna break a hypnosis magician code here, just a little bit. All right, hypnosis is not done by the hypnotist. We're the spectator. You're doing all the work. We're just taking credit. Ultimately, all we're doing is we're telling you to think of this. Are we doing the thinking? No, you are. We're telling you to walk through this in your mind. Are we doing that? No, you are.
So what about something like the Woody Harrelson character in the Now You See Me movies?
And 90% of that is
stage hypnotism.
There's some truth to it, some not. You can't openly drop somebody into trance that you've never met before and never seen. Mostly because everybody has different variances of modalities. Yeah. Like in the first one, when you see the money truck like pull up and he just immediately goes like that, and they immediately both just drop. No, that does not happen.
No. That's mind control.
Yeah, that's straight up movie is what that is.
Well, it's the reality of movies. That,
yeah.
You know, as a magician, I could pick apart the magic in that movie easily. As well.
It's a kind of bit, but a lot of the like.
One time.
Maybe somewhere down the road.
A lot of the stuff that he was doing though was hypnosis. In particular, at one point when he has the French guy like come up and you see him like sort of like tap the guy on the chest and head real quick, and the guy's like, ugh. That's actually a hypnotic trick to actually nail off somebody with like kind of like a triple threat of a kinesthetic and visual induction. At another point in the second film, for those of us that haven't seen it, they did come out with a sequel,
and there's a third one coming.
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I'm excited.
Yes. One of the characters is trying to learn hypnosis at the same time and is trying to like trick other characters how to do it, and Harrelson's trying to like mentor him on it. The thing of you can stare into your hand left and right like that. That's an actual thing that's done. Okay. Little bits here and there. It seemed like the second film really focused on that bit, mostly because Harrelson was playing two parts.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know. And some of that stuff there was also very tricky, like the spinning of the umbrella that suddenly stops and it says sleep. Okay, you got a pattern interrupt there. You've got stuff like the pizza that suddenly has your name on it. You're reading it and you're like so focused on it, and then all of a sudden you see something that you don't, you're down. That actually is something. Everybody has different forms of modalities, which means ways to actually drop down. It's all in the trick of understanding the rapport between yourself and your potential subject, because everybody goes down different ways.
How accurate? I'm curious, because one of the things I thought was interesting in that movie that seems to fit at least a little of what I know the neurology was where they're going through the tunnel and the flashing lights.
Binaural beats as well as a visual strobe and a focus induction. That actually does work. You can drop somebody down fairly quickly on that. The thing is that when they're dropped, they have some awareness to them. They know that they're dropped, but the thing is that if a person's mind has been dropped numerous times, which I guarantee you, the realisticness of that, they would have had to do something where it dropped the person down, then brought them back up, then dropped them down and brought them back up, and dropped them down and dropped them back up at least 8 or 9 times to do what we call a state of fractionation, which means when you're in that type of deep hypnosis, you're essentially hypno-drunk and completely susceptible to any and all suggestions that come forth to you. Why am I slipping into my hypno voice all of a sudden?
Of course.
I'm not complaining. I'm thinking that we definitely need to probably not next week because of Virgo, but let's just do it and we'll do tonight will be the quick cover because we don't have that much time. Maybe after Virgo, Brian take a night and we'll just do a whole night about the misconceptions of vampires and misconceptions about hypnosis. Because there's easily plenty more we're only brushing the surface on.
Well, we already did a vampire episode. Where
True, but let's do a hypnosis episode.
Okay.
Okay, no problem.
I'm assuming you don't object, Baron.
I will never object.
And hypnosis is absolutely fat. Well, I wouldn't even without the influence.
When the time comes, I think you should read.
Yes.
You should read that one. I want to hear you do it in your voice.
In my voice.
Yeah.
I will say the other thing, and I think Baron will back me up on it. I find interesting. Is there's also the other thing you're running into, the thing that gets people to act like a chicken, is the concept of suggestion.
Right.
You don't need hypnosis to do suggestion.
There's a yes and a no to that. There's varying forms of what we call neurolinguistic programming, or
Well,
NLP,
yes.
which will allow a person to do things that they normally would not do. And the key word here is normally not do.
Yeah.
So it's like being drunk.
Yeah, in a way. It's hypnosis. Here's the
What I
best way
mean
to
is there are
explain
ways
that.
to get. There's ways to get suggestions. It still work in terms of that without necessarily conscious NLP. I don't know enough about NLP as a whole, but just because of the way getting people in the right state of mind.
Oh, yes.
Doing it subtly over a period of time.
Yes. I mean, it
It's-
does
You don't
work.
need the hypnotic trance state
Right.
to do that to somebody.
In which case, then that's what I call kind of like a subtle Pavlovian sort of a
Conditioning.
How I Met Your Mother was a pretty good example where they wanted Barney Stinson wanted to be able to see Lily Aldrin's boobs. So what he perfectly did was set it up so that every single time whenever he sneezed, Marshall would say, "Let's go to Shinjitsu, a hibachi restaurant," just to set up a bet. And did it for over a year and a half, where every single time he sneezed, he would suggest, "Let's go to Shinjitsu." So eventually it became a conditioned response where, "Hachu, let's go to Shinjitsu." Okay. It's a subtle mind ploy tact because now it's buried within your subconscious to do a particular thing. Now, whenever it comes to, I see there was another thought and it completely escaped me because you talked about that.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. Are there any other secondary misconceptions you might have? Oh, that, I almost had it.
The Manchurian Candidate idea.
That is...
Probably the biggest thing you see, hypnosis.
The attempt to make this was a lot. It was hypnosis, but it's a lot more.
It was
than hypnosis.
LSD-induced hypnosis.
Yeah.
Mostly chemical-induced hypnosis does allow for some modification of the subconscious. It's the reason why LSD was a big thing. Timothy Leary was the man with it, but...
Volunteered for the MK Ultra
yeah.
experiments for the free LSD, no less.
Oh, yes. And it's interesting when you bring somebody down to that ultimate state because... you have all of these misconceptions of what it's like to be in an altered state. Meanwhile, in hypnosis, you're in a complete and total altered state. There's no other way to describe it.
But how realistic is that, the idea of deep programming someone so that they essentially have a hidden personality
I've seen it.
ready to be triggered?
Really?
I've seen it.
Okay.
I was always skeptical of that.
Yeah. that's
It
interesting.
depends on one of the hypnotists and two the subject and how much of a rapport the hypnotist and subject have. I am fully aware of folks that have been partners with each other for like 20 years that have been doing hypnosis between each other. At that point, you'll be talking to one of them. He'll come up with an immediate hypno trigger and a snap of the finger, and it's like I'm talking to somebody completely different. Personality-wise, their voice, inflection, syntax, all completely changes at the drop of a hat.
That's fascinating.
It's almost scary because I was talking to this nice, sweet, innocent person, and the next thing you know, I might as well have been talking to a dominatrix that was on her worst day.
Oh, wow. Well, the other thing I would point to as well that you run into, because this is something we're building to, we've been talking about, is the satanic ritual abuse panic.
Oh, yes.
And
That
the reality
was big.
that in terms of implanting false memories, it's easier in a trance state. You can do it without the trance state by using the right leading questions.
Now, the thing is ironically, that's NLP. That is what I call passive NLP. It's using leading questions in order to be able to repetitively kick a person's doubt into gear, and eventually they end up starting to form a defense against it, and the only way to do that is to fabricate images and memories in their mind so that this way the question can stop being asked.
Okay, so here's what I would suggest. I'm thinking, and if listeners, if you disagree, feel free to let us know in the comments.
Please.
Either of you, if you disagree, let me know now or privately. But I'm thinking next week have Virgo on because the mirroring. Then let's get into a bigger episode on hypnosis, and then let's logically segue from there into talking about the abuse scare.
Definitely,
Okay.
definitely.
So with that, we're nearing the 15 minutes left. Are there any major?
Oh, good lord! This is
misconceptions
also an
about-
episode easily of itself.
Give us a taste.
Let's do so I'll do the big boys. The biggest misconception, and this is something I sort of addressed. I think you had joined us by then. Which reminds me as well. Anyone who hasn't, go to our channel. Check out. I did an interview with Tony Reed, the host of the YouTube channel How Creationism Taught Me Real Science. Baron actually joined us after the first hour. It was a fabulous interview. Tony is a really great guy.
That he is.
Nice.
But we were talking about one of the concerns that people have when I'm talking to skeptics and non-believers is, can you prove any of this exists? No, I can't. I can't prove to you I can't summon a demon and reliably have it appear in front of somebody, whether they believe or not believe. They're thinking beings. They act on their own schedules. But sometimes, I'm not a parapsychologist. Parapsychologists are interested in proving it. I'm not. I'm interested in helping people. So I think one of the biggest ones is that it matters whether or not we can prove it. Because you know what? If somebody is being so tormented by the experiences they're having that they're going to commit suicide, whether or not the experience is objectively real is secondary.
Mm-hmm.
I care more about, we need to do something because I don't want this person to commit suicide. Neither, I think, does anybody else.
No.
And there is a reality that when you're dealing with certain types, even with certain types of delusions, it isn't always productive to try to fight the delusion, especially with somebody in crisis.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
Another big one among paranormal investigators is that everything is ghosts. That everything is... there is a group that thankfully has lost popularity known as International Ghost Hunter Society and Philadelphia Ghost Hunters Alliance that advocated everything is human spirits and that there was no way to get rid of spirits. The only thing you could do was learn to live with whatever was happening in your house. This is horse manure.
Wow, that's a really unhelpful kind of philosophy.
There is something that can be done. This actually leads into another good segue. You will run into, particularly among born-agains, almost the opposite opinion. You run into two opposite opinions among born-again Christians, which is, one, everything is demons. No, it's not. And when we have more time, when I have time, I can sit down with you and go, okay, so here's 1 Samuel in the Bible, where it says the witch of Endor summoned the spirit of Samuel. The Bible doesn't say a spirit that pretended to be Samuel, which is the way most Christians interpret it. It says she summoned Samuel. And, I'm not the most literal interpreter of the Bible, but...
Were there Ewoks there?
She was the witch of Endor.
Yeah, I've had the same thought, I have to admit.
Wait a minute.
But
the Bible mentions Endor?
Yes.
About 10 seconds, Aaron's going to call me, probably.
But the critical thing you run into here is, one, it clearly says it was the spirit of Samuel. Two, he doesn't behave like a demon should. Now, demons, as, to get biblical on everybody, because I'm a Christian, the devil comes not but to steal, kill, and destroy. He doesn't come around to do petty parlor tricks, to amuse people. And the other thing is that goes along with the steal, kill, and destroy is their job on earth is to promote sin. It's to make people do bad things. Now, Saul, the king who came to the Witch of Endor, should never have been coming to a medium. Should never have been coming to what was probably actually more properly a full necromancer. It was against Jewish law. It was against his oaths as king. It angered God enormously. A demon would have encouraged him to do that more. When Samuel shows up, he's furious with Saul and berates him and condemns him for this decision he made. Even beyond that, in the New Testament, Jesus appeared during the Transfiguration. Moses and Elijah appear and speak with Jesus.
Okay.
And also again, New Testament, when St. Thomas, doubting Thomas, is like, I think Jesus is a ghost. Notice nobody goes, there's no such thing as ghosts, it's a demon. There is no point in the Bible that explicitly says that all spirits are demons. It allows for place of angels, and it does allow for human spirits. The other mistake that you find with the born-agains that drives me up the bloody wall is there's this idea that either A, exorcism always works, or B, that if it doesn't work, it's the fault of the person who's being exorcised. And both of them are wrong. One, the reality is there's a lot of reasons why exorcisms don't always work. One of the reasons that the born-agains never acknowledge is it's the faith of the person performing the ritual against the power of the demon. if the person's faith isn't up to the challenge, it's not going to work.
Hmm.
Where faith
Makes
where
sense.
faith healers and deliverance ministers, it's not all, because some deliverance ministers are on point. So I'm not trying to denounce all of them, and some actual exorcists are completely full of it. But particularly with deliverance ministers, you will get ones that will never acknowledge the idea that they might have screwed up, that they might not have been up to it. And that's not, it's just not true. Which leads to another one, which is, there's another common misconception, it's not entirely a misconception, but it's a dangerous road to start down among Christians, that any Christian can cast out demons.
Oh, well, yeah. I think we talked about that on the demon episodes
Sure.
and stuff. That's
True, but
dangerous.
it's still it's a dangerous mistake, and it's a misunderstanding. We talked about this with demons in the other voice to a point. The Bible does say that we have the authority to cast out demons.
Authority and ability are two different things.
Yes. But also what it's talking about, remember we talked about there's the ordinary activity of demons and the extraordinary activity of demons. We very much have authority over the ordinary activity, which goes into, like we were talking about, about saying things can change the pathways in your head.
Changing the way you think.
Authority, the authority, an exorcism, which comes from Latin, to bind by oath, requires authority. Now, I'm not going to say that, I will not say that no exorcism performed by a non-priest has ever worked, because the reality is some of them do. In specific and unusual circumstances, and usually with somebody who really knows what the hell they're doing. Case in point, in the original Conjuring, Lorraine Warren denied that Ed ever performed an exorcism himself, but I have a confirmation from an actual exorcist that in an emergency situation like that, someone with the experience and knowledge that Ed had could have done one successfully.
Right.
It doesn't make it a good idea, but he could.
No, it's not a smart idea.
Well, and there's also a concept. Here's the difference. There's a prayer for deliverance, which is what most people think of, and there's an exorcism. Anyone can pray for someone's deliverance from a demon, and it will genuinely help. But, Jesus said, that which you bind on earth, I shall bind in heaven. And said that to, you are the rock upon which I will build my church, against which the gates of hell will not stand. When a properly ordained priest, minister of God, performs an exorcism, he brings the full spiritual weight of the church down on the head of that demon. There is an authority that God gave to his followers, which has weight, but there's an authority that God also gave to his church. And this is, when I say this, I do not mean the Roman Catholic Church. I do not mean the Orthodox Church. I don't mean a single specific church. I mean the combined body of people who truly have faith.
It's the difference between using a bullet to excise a demon as opposed to using a mountain.
Yeah.
It's the finger.
The finger.
Yes.
And it's forcing it, it's binding by oath, forcing it out, and there are consequences to the demon when it's cast out properly.
Demoted.
Yes, absolutely right. Those are probably, and here's another thing, and this isn't quite a common misconception, as a common mistake. And it's a very understandable one, but people who get into the paranormal often get a misconception of everything's a spirit. Christians particularly get into everything's a demon, but if you spend a long time investigating the paranormal, or if you spend a long time living in a haunted house, it's very easy to blame everything on the paranormal. But you have to be your own best skeptic about things and realize, no, wait, it's not a damned soul from hell walking across the roof. It's the floor creaking in the nearly hurricane force winds we're experiencing.
Or a neighborhood cat.
Or a neighborhood
something,
cat.
Trash pandas.
Trash pandas. Yeah. And here's the thing, because we're all having fun with this, but it's a mistake even experience. I've had moments.
That was the best story, the one that you told about the mistake.
Which one? There's several.
The one that turned out to be trash pandas.
Yes. Yeah. Experienced investigators make mistakes, and especially there is very much an element of suggestion and an element of when you go looking for the paranormal, you tend to find it.
Okay.
Because there's a situation, it's confirmation bias. If you're looking for something hard enough, anything you find will be evidence of it.
Scartoma.
And it works both ways, by the way. Hardcore skeptics will ignore evidence to the contrary just as readily as hardcore believers. There's a middle ground you've got to walk of accepting at least the possibility and not buying everything. I remember, I'm trying to think of a good example. Oh, wait, I know a perfect example, and you were there for this.
Oh, yeah, the EVP.
Doing EVPs up in the Catskills last Halloween.
They were trying to prove to me that it was, that it was real and that we could catch something.
And I made a mistake.
We thought we had one
because
for a minute.
we had a situation where one of the women's cell phones all of a sudden lit up on its own without being touched or without the buttons being pressed, which is pretty unusual. And we all considered this a sign, especially because it started happening in patterns. But when that happened, I said, hello, and we're all listening back to the EVP, and we hear this voice say hello, and none of us, including me, remembered me saying it. So we spent, 5-10 minutes
We thought
trying to figure out what had happened.
we thought one of the spirits that was there had finally decided to speak up.
Oh, boy.
This is also why, and I know better, so I have no excuse. When doing an EVP, keep unnecessary conversation to a minimum.
Yeah, you would think
And
that would be.
we're just about at the 7:30 mark, so Baron, if you
Alright.
would like to read the last ad.
Yes, take it away.
Gladly. Everyone is concerned about internet security these days, from governments to major corporations. Even the average internet user should be concerned about who is seeing your online information and how that information can be used. NordVPN is the answer you've been looking for. A VPN is a virtual private network that protects your IP address so that your online activity is protected by a military-grade encryption. The way it works is, you connect to Nord's protected network, and then they connect to the internet. It is a layer of protection between you and all the viruses, malware, and snoopers out there. Nord works on all devices, too, not just computers. Your phone, tablet, whatever, up to 6 devices at a time, regardless of what operating system they use. Nord works with them all. Access all the internet content you want, streaming media, websites, and social platforms. Nothing is restricted on Nord, so it's a great way to get around those pesky firewalls at work. Or maybe if you live in a country that's not so internet friendly. They have easy plans starting a month for $11.95, down to 3-year plans for as low as $2.75 a month. Check it out risk-free at nordvpn.com, and you'll be glad you did.
Okay. I want to thank everybody, ladies and gentlemen, for listening in. Remember to check out Nord, links in the description, and as well check out Audible. If you can help out the Patreon, because remember, we've got a chance to go back to 2 hours, and we'd like to do that, and we think everybody else would like to do it.
You will do it.
If you can do that, it'll be a massive help to us.
You will do it.
But that's going to do it for tonight, ladies and gentlemen. This is Kevin Mears
Brian McKinley.
Baron Voltage.
saying good night and God bless.
Live long and prosper.
Avoid lightning rods.
Good night, everyone.
Au revoir.